if you aren't thinking about TikTok halo, you're maybe judging your TikTok performance in a silo, and it all comes down to the strategy. Discover on TikTok, buy on Amazon Prime.
If I'm thinking from the consumer's perspective, Amazon probably wins out in terms of the trusted process of buying a product, getting it in 2 days, and being able to return it. Different, maybe, for a younger audience. TikTok has traditional younger people on it. That creates a different perspective, I think, for people that are buying on TikTok directly versus buying on Amazon. What actually is TikTok halo? What does that mean?
Yeah, so when we're talking about TikTok halo, and it's really about the TikTok halo to Amazon, it is all about attribution. It's all about the challenge of trying to determine the performance on TikTok driving conversions on Amazon. And this isn't a revolutionary concept in performance marketing. Obviously, multi-touch attribution or attribution across different channels has always been a challenge. It's been particularly interesting for us working with Amazon as our kind of core platform or first channel, and then seeing TikTok scale so quickly. And that's the name that people are giving this interesting effect.
Yep.
And I think it matters a lot to brands, because if you aren't thinking about a TikTok halo, you're maybe judging your TikTok performance in a silo, and it all comes down to the strategy. Discover on TikTok, buy on Amazon Prime. And that's the challenge. I think there's a big difference between buying on TikTok Shop and finding a product on TikTok and buying on Amazon. And it relates also to the type of brand, because in general, what we're hearing is, and what we're seeing is, that one of the biggest issues for brands entering TikTok is discounting.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at some of the native products on TikTok Shop, you often see this sort of viral activity driven by heavy discounting, almost like a flash sale.
Yep.
When you look at the larger brands that I think are now surging onto TikTok because they're more comfortable with the platform, after all the issues last year of it essentially being banned in the United States, they are different brands that effectively are not brands that are so conducive to discounting. And so that's where this TikTok halo really matters, because they're going to keep up price parity. They have to avoid channel conflicts. And actually, and a very interesting point on top of that is what we're seeing is that those larger brands may not even have a TikTok Shop.
Right.
And so again, they're literally just focusing on TikTok for discovery.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to see more of, right? We're going to see, obviously TikTok has an incentive to close the loop inside a TikTok Shop. But I think we're seeing larger brands that want to maintain price, and really almost that issue amplifies the attribution or the halo problem. What do you think?
No, I think there are a couple interesting positions and perspectives to take as if I'm thinking of a brand and I'm thinking of TikTok, selling on TikTok, and the halo effect that it has on my Amazon sales. There are a couple factors there. If I'm thinking from the consumer's perspective, Amazon probably wins out in terms of, I don't even know what to call it, but like the trusted process of buying a product, getting it in 2 days, and being able to return it. There's a lot in there that you're talking about with consumer trust. TikTok has like a lot of hoops to jump through, I think, to build that trust with consumers over time. Caveat, different maybe for a younger audience. TikTok has traditional younger people on it, a lot of women as well. That creates a different perspective, I think, for people that are buying on TikTok directly versus buying on Amazon. So I don't know what do you have thoughts on like that younger audience, consumer trust? I don't know.
Well, the consumer trust, yes, I was talking, that's a really good one. And it's very, very, very relevant and very fresh, because I was talking to an operator from a large beauty brand today, actually. And they had tested TikTok And one of their biggest issues was the discounting that we've already talked about. The other issue was the ability to basically handle and monitor for the claims that were being made.
Mm,
The example that I heard was there were a whole load of creators um, on TikTok saying, buy this product, it's going to be discontinued.
mm,
And they were doing that to drive this virality, obviously to drive as much conversion as possible to get their affiliate commission.
mm,
That was definitely not what the brand wanted. And in fact, in this particular example, the product wasn't being discontinued.
mm.
And so,
Wow.
I think again, these larger brands do have a trust challenge.
Yeah.
We've had another large brand that we work with on Amazon in in a in the pet food space actually,
Mm,
and it's a very focused brand who cares a lot about the efficacy of their product, the ingredients, and there's that risk factor, right? If you built a brand in, let's say, a health space or a beauty product, pet or whatever it is, and it needs to have you need some controlling over your messaging.
yeah.
And so I think it's a really interesting problem, right? It's
Yeah,
like
it is.
you want to go viral, you want to go viral for the right reasons. You want to not. You want to get the discoverability to drive demand, but you definitely don't want to have things off brand. You don't want to have channel disruption. Um, and so, yeah, these are this is the sort of pros and cons
Yeah.
of
Well,
this attribution
part,
problem.
part of the nature of TikTok is like not being able to control how everyone talks about something, right? Like it being a content first platform lends itself to influencers and whoever's buying this product to create a video about it, which can potentially lead to, well, manipulation, intentional manipulation from like an influencer side to try and drive affiliate traffic, but also organic differences in how people talk about maybe your product. I'm curious about how do you think big brands should think about selling on TikTok in the sense that like, okay, uh the halo effect creates this thing that's hard to measure that brings stuff back to Amazon, right? So what's the right metric that these big brands should pay attention to maybe on the TikTok side?
Well, from a metric standpoint, I mean, that's one of the things that we're working on, like trying to figure out those costs. And the costs are different on TikTok. The costs of the affiliates, there's
Mhm.
the cost of, if you are discounting, many of the large brands and established brands don't want to discount. So that's sort of not so important. The TikTok shop ads or TikTok ads, they're two different things. If you could be a bigger brand and run larger ad campaigns on TikTok, not necessarily driving to TikTok shop. Um, and all of that cost, what is the ROAS, right?
Right.
And if you're measuring it just against TikTok shop data, and how would that, because there's no pixel, there's
Mm.
no direct way to create an inbound funnel into Amazon, and it's hard to measure when someone opens the Amazon app and buys. And so the thing that we're doing first is really just getting a handle of what's going on TikTok,
Right.
um, across all of those different areas. Like, do brands have a picture of what's going on? And that's the first part of the measurement. And then secondarily, it's can we get an attribution signal?
Mm.
And that's a challenge, but it's been really interesting, and it's going really well. And so I think there isn't really a silver bullet necessarily to answer your question of what should a brand do.
Yeah.
What I would say for sure is you've got to be leaning in. You've got to be
Yeah.
looking at just the sheer volume of buying behavior and discoverability.
I would agree with that. If I'm
I think the
thinking
other
about
thing,
how to place,
yeah.
like, it's a good question too of how to place TikTok with what you're currently doing. TikTok maybe remains an unproven asset for you as a brand, an unproven marketplace yet. Maybe it is proven. Some brands it probably is with like throwing content up, working with affiliates, and seeing it increase revenue like very directly. But for a lot of people, maybe it's not very clear yet. I think it belong for me. If I was a brand operator, it would probably belong in a sort of test format to see exactly what results
Yeah,
we can drive through an affiliate program, and also see what content we can get for our brand that
yeah,
could be utilized elsewhere.
yeah, yeah. And I think to add to that, be open-minded about, for example, like comparing the revenue directly from
Yeah,
TikTok to Amazon. If you look at it that way, and you're scaled and you're well established and you're a large brand, that's $10 million plus on Amazon, it's going to be potentially very hard to justify all of that energy and effort if you come out of the gate and don't see the conversion. And so you probably would be disappointed if you measure it on the traditional metrics of the obvious ones, which is revenue and return on ad spend or just direct ROI.
mm,
Um, and so I think you have to put it into, as you said, I like it, put it like we said, which is put it into an experimental bucket. Um, think of it as a top of funnel marketing campaign, right?
yeah,
And I think when you judge it that way, you're not measuring it necessarily as, direct revenue initially. I think it's also interesting just to see what TikTok does.
yeah,
More and more focus on opportunities for brands. For example, sponsored TikTok shop ads, better ad targeting. TikTok's going to definitely improve what it's doing there. And I think if you, to your earlier point, right, you've got the content. You actually need that content. That's a very important thing I would advise getting going soon as well. You need that content engine. You need that muscle.
yeah,
And whether that's an in-house muscle or working with a TSP, TikTok Shop partner, or an agency,
hmm,
you got to get all of that content going and getting a vibrant TikTok presence.
mm,
So when you're ready to put the foot on the gas, and so I think it's a must do for large brands in certainly many categories, but just think of it differently and get started early is what I
yeah,
would
yeah.
advise.
If I think back to our conversation last week talking about LLMs, how when I first started using LLMs like ChatGPT, they were worse than they are now. I would expect TikTok Shop to grow and improve over time. I don't think that's a bad bet to make. And
Right.
and the question is how it'll change over time. I would guess it's going to get more precise. Tracking is going to be a little bit easier over time. This would be a pretty good time to get in and start testing to have at least established workflows for your company and your brand to build over time towards an established workflow process for when TikTok Shop is at that point where it's like fully flushed out, it's running. There's another aspect that I think is interesting, and it's also to think about things from the Amazon side. So we're talking about the TikTok Halo, right? Which it originates on TikTok and maybe goes over to Amazon. But what about development from the Amazon side as it relates to TikTok? This is not exactly it, but I see Amazon trying to do a couple things that are like TikTok, like getting
Mm.
content more involved on the creation side, on the discovery side for products. I'm also thinking
Well,
about how
yeah.
Amazon will change as it relates to that.
Well, they killed their in-app experience on the mobile side. I don't know exactly the date, but it was killed by the end of last year for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And it was that sort of basically inserting a TikTok like feed into the. Do you remember that in
I
the
do remember that.
Amazon
Yes,
mobile app?
yes,
I think the challenge with that, of course, was you're not on Amazon to spend time browsing through
no,
vertical video. Um, it's not enjoyable.
right,
It just to sort of flip through all these just pure creator feed. Um, and we've done some experiments with our own apps as well, as with Hive, and these are the experiments that are really interesting. I think this is where TikTok is so powerful because its core business, its core value prop is so effective. The TikTok algorithm around the content graph and this really, I mean, the average US TikTok user is spending 90 minutes plus was the last metric. Probably gone up even more. And so, look, I think it'd be hard for Amazon to compete in that area because of just what everyone, or at least active TikTok users, are sort of glued to it for different reasons.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so again, I think it comes back to, this is what this, if that's the case, then the world has multiple touch points. And
Yes.
I think what another interesting observation is these larger brands that maybe 4 or 5 years ago thought of themselves as like D2C,
Hmm.
and then they were sort of not going to work on Amazon intentionally. And it was a sort of D2C versus Amazon game. I mean, all of these high flying D2C companies that raised a lot of money in 2021, as an example, it's so amazing to see those actually lean in now. And that's into Amazon. And so they're
Yeah.
thinking about Amazon as this fulfillment experience. They're thinking of Amazon as this Amazon Prime. And I think that's the mindset. I think that's the strategy, right? Like
Yeah.
there are going to
Yeah.
be, and you could put in ChatGPT into that. You could put
Right.
Claude
Right.
into that, and see, to your point, like what's that going to do to the funnel? And it's and in many cases it will come back to Amazon because of the strength of the delivery network. I think there's nothing that can beat Amazon Prime, and it just becomes even more efficient and faster. So it's really exciting for us because obviously we've got a real kind of heritage in the Amazon optimization space, and
Yeah.
it's helping brands kind of connect the dots more.
As I'm thinking about key takeaways for this conversation, I think about, you mentioned like the multi touch point aspect of someone buying a product. I think TikTok plays a big part in that. I think the halo effect shows how it jumps back to Amazon, how a discovery platform like TikTok can show content to someone, show content to a consumer. That consumer can either buy on TikTok or they jump over to a trusted purchase platform like Amazon. But you zoom out, the main takeaway there is like it takes another touch point, takes another platform to help drive discovery. Amazon plays a part in the actual purchase of that product too. I think that's a key takeaway for me. TikTok being put into an experimental bucket as a brand, I think, is another key takeaway for me as well. It's worth starting now to establish that workflow, to start understanding what it means to tap into influencers and affiliates, to just get into that world. I think that's another key takeaway for me as well. Alistair, what about you?
One of the biggest things that I think, especially larger brands, need to think about as a takeaway would be, don't just think about TikTok as a discount requirement. The largest brands out there aren't necessarily thinking about how TikTok's going to mess up their overall merchandising, especially around price.
Hmm.
Think of it as a upper funnel marketing strategy, discovery, capture. And that just doesn't mean that you have to go in and heavily create some kind of flash sale. And that's one of the key takeaways that I think is important to think about.
Yeah, that's great. I think good discussion. Definitely more to come. This won't be the last time we talk about TikTok Halo. There's definitely more to come for this,
Definitely not.
especially as it develops over time. But Alistair, looking forward to having more conversations next week. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Cameron.